Hello everyone, welcome to our final episode of our three-part series that we're currently doing on NetSuite and as well as with MCP. So I'm Ratul, I've joined with Alejandro here, and if you are with us for the last two episodes, good, thank you, you're already here, and then we have covered a lot of things, and then we'll talk.
Yeah, well, hey, good to see you back, Ratul. Thanks for joining me here. Allowing me to join you. So we covered a lot. In episode 1, we kind of laid the foundation. We talked about what MCP was, why it's important, why everybody's talking about it. Episode 2, we talked about very cool examples. How we've used MCP and how we've shown MCP to our customers and things we can do. And we only covered the surface. And I think today we're going to talk a little bit more about, how we do this. So tell us a little bit more about what we're covering today.
Yeah, so we will be covering about the security compliance, like what are the best practices that one implementation team should do, and then we'll talk about like how we should phase out our projects around MCP, right?
Yeah. So let's get right into it. We have 50 minutes, so we'll talk about implementation challenges first. There's a lot of implementation challenges that companies need to be aware of. The first one is really unclear objectives, right? And it's not only limited to MCP, but we'll focus on that. Is a lot of people will jump into implementing MCP like any other technology, but without really knowing why, right? We showed how simple it is to implement, right? But if you start jumping into any integration, any project without objectives, the project is not going to be as successful as you think it's going to be, right? And the adoption is not going to be as wide as you think, right? So companies need to ask themselves, what problem are we solving?
Yeah.
What really are we trying to do?
Yes. So exactly. So we need to know are we trying to reduce the hours whenever we are doing the book closing, right? Or is it like we are reducing the time for the manual journal entries? All this, it matters. We need to have clear objectives.
Yeah,
right?
Clear objectives are important, right? Without it, projects don't work.
Yeah.
Projects, no one adopts it, and it has to be measurable. Like you said, how much days to close are we doing? How many days we reduce days to close by? How fast we can get cash flow reports out to our management. Yes. It has to be something we can measure. So you have to have a beginning point to be able to see if it gives you the ROI, and then roll it out and from that, it's the next step, right?
Yeah.
Is you have an objective, but is your data good? So tell us a little bit about data readiness.
Yeah, so data readiness is most important thing here in the sense, let's say you have the technology that is already ready, right? You have the team working on that integration between the AI tools and the NetSuite, right? How about the data, right? So if your data is not good, then the response that you'll get, so that will not make any sense, right? So it's always about the data. You need to know the entities that you have. You have to know your chart of accounts, right? And then, or if let's say there are vendors that are duplicated or any other entities that are duplicated, right? So you need to know all of those before you go implement something.
Right. Yeah, because at the end, MCP is looking at data, right? It's looking at data. It's analyzing data. It's trying to make predictions with data. So we talked about garbage in, garbage out, or garbage in, poison out, and the idea of how little importance sometimes organizations give to data. They want to be able to invoice fast. They want to be able to have the format look nice, but they're not looking about categorizing vendors, categorizing items, creating the right segmentation. And without that, it's hard to dive deep and take advantage not only of the LLM connecting to NetSuite, but LLMs use predictive models that are created, out of the intelligence that it's gathered, right, out of NetSuite, right? So, and it's not glamorous work, right? Cleaning data sounds boring. It's time consuming. And it requires governance of the data. Not only clean it as you are trying to implement, but to keep it clean as you add. And that's where also, just kind of plug in with NetSuite, right? And any other ERP, but NetSuite, the the importance of creating fields mandatory, creating list fields instead of text fields, checkbox instead of yes, no, stuff like that. We run into other implementations all the time. So you have to think about your data strategy as you're implementing, not after you implement. Right? We talked about security and compliance risk. That's also an implementation challenge. And one that, at the round table that I was in last week, was the first question they asked me is, how does MCP handle security? So what are your thoughts there?
So definitely in terms of security, your team needs to align on that before you implement something, right? So you need to know the right roles are being used for your integrations, right? If it doesn't fall under a particular security, right? So you need to know, right? And then at the same time, let's say if you are exposing some data, right? And then that is being written from the AI tools also, that is also something that you have to take care of through the role, right?
So companies need to do their homework on compliance. So it's not only security for your customers, but it could be HIPAA compliance, it could be SOX compliance. If you're a public company, you can be having your data be exported by users that have access to MCP, right? So that part of data, of security and compliance, is probably the most important part that people can overlook, right? We just implement without an objective. They don't have good data, and the data is being out there for the world to see. It's important, right? So I'll say that the key takeaway there is security is not an afterthought, right? It has to be done early.
And then one more thing is the resistance to change, right? So the implementation that we are doing for like the technology that we have, it worked perfectly, but it still like failed because of the team never brought in the like right data or right everything that is not right. It has to be like implemented, right? All right, we talked about the pitfalls, right? So let's talk about the best practices, the governance or the governance framework that we need in this integration, right? So can you tell us a little bit more?
Really, governance means define the rules of the road, right? So once you implement, you can't just implement and let it sit, right? You have to manage it. So it's very, very important that once you have a good implementation, what is the path, the plan, the framework that companies use to make sure that it's being used, that it's being aligned, that it's being managed properly. Really, it's just defining the rules of the road, right? Who owns it? There has to be an owner. Like everything has to be an owner for the integration.
So I mean that with that, so it's always like you have everything, but let's say who is like responsible for everything, right? And then in a live environment, like everything can go wrong, right? So it's just that, let's say you have an anomaly detection, but let's say it can pick some transactions that are good, right? So it doesn't have anything wrong, but still it can pick. So in terms of like, let's say any prediction also, it can go wrong, right? So with that, so it's always about the governance framework. And then if you want to talk about, let's say...
But one more thing on governance is important. We recommend two things. You said something, it's predictive, right? Generative AI is generating and it's thinking, so there's always going to be hallucinations, right? So refining and reviewing that model, but also we recommend that there's a steering committee. We're big believers that if you implement, you have a steering committee to make sure that the implementation is being aligned to the business objectives, because we know, people get creative, IT teams get excited, and you may be taking it too far. The business may not be aligned, right? And I think we're going to talk about alignment. So the finance and IT alignment is another best practice once you have your pitfalls covered, right? Is you gotta make sure, like in any implementation, especially when the ERP that is finance data driven, that finance and IT are aligned. Finance defines the requirements, IT defines the strategy. So we always say the what and the how, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, if your IT team and finance team are not in alignment, then both parties are different. Like they have, let's say, the finance knows what they want, right? And then IT also knows what they need to do. But if they don't align, then there can be a solution that will just work in document or in like in your like let's say,
On paper.
yeah, in your paper,
Yeah.
right? So, but yeah, so it can go wrong when you go live, right?
Right,
So,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, the most successful implementations we've seen on anything that has to do with data with an ERP, it's the functional team, right? Where it's the finance team, whether it's an operations team, if it's about inventory, that alignment is key. If we do a finance only team, they don't know how to build the technology. If we do a technology only team, they might not understand the business.
Yes.
So a perfect team is a combination of that.
Yeah.
And then we continuous user training is key, right? So
Yes.
MCP, especially the pro models, are not free.
Yep.
NetSuite Access is not free. So the way at least NetSuite manages now access, you have to have a paid license on NetSuite to be able to access via even with the MCP, right?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on what is our recommendations when it comes to training and continuous training?
Yeah. So first of all, the users who will be using this one, they need to have a good understanding of what they need actually, right? And then at the same time, they need to also prepare, I would say, the prompts, right? Because the prompts also matter, right? So in the sense, let's say if you're just putting a normal thing and then your data may be correct, right? The MCP may be gathering all the data, but based on your inputs or the prompts that you're giving, it may not like align everything and then give you the right results, right? So
Right.
it's important.
Yeah, building a prompt library.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody talks about
exactly.
prompt library.
Yeah.
And building a learning program. Whether
Yeah.
a company has an LCS system, whether they just use Excel to track the courses and links to things on tools like LinkedIn Learning and other. It's
Yes.
important to build a continuous training program. To your point,
Yep.
I've read before that there's only 5% of users that use AI that actually know how to use AI. They think that you can actually
Yes.
converse. You have to define the persona, you have to define the task. So that's key, right?
Yep.
Before we wrap up, again, some honorable mentions. You want to prompt library, review the model. You want to make sure that it's refined.
Very fine.
LLM models are coming out with new versions it seems every week now.
Yeah,
every couple of months, and they're competing with each other.
Yes.
So refine that using the right model for the right reason. There's reasoning models or learning models. There's
Yes.
training models, right?
Yes.
The other one is phased implementation approach.
Yep.
You have an objective, like we talked.
Yeah.
You can't implement everything at once.
Yes.
Start
Yes.
with the super users and have the super users for certain
Yeah.
areas then defined, right? And then the last one is performance.
Performance.
So
Yeah.
being able to make sure that it's performing and that you're not using all your credits. All these models,
Yeah.
again, they're not unlimited, right? At
Yeah.
least not now.
Yeah.
So managing that. I think we're gonna start the recap in a couple seconds. But any other thoughts on implementation and kind of successful implementation strategy?
Yeah, so it's always about like you talked about phased implementation. So everything you can't go with everything at once, right? So you need to phase it out, and then in the sense, let's say you also gather some of the feedbacks from your first phase, let's say,
Yeah.
and based on that you improve your system,
Yeah.
right? All those.
Exactly. All right, let's bring this home. So we've covered a lot in last 3 episodes. Very cool stuff. There's whole lot more we could cover, right?
Yeah.
So episode 1, what did we talk about episode 1?
So yeah, in episode 1 we talked about MCP, the main point for this particular talk that we had, right? So MCP and NetSuite, right? So we have covered everything in terms of we laid out the foundation for the MCP, and then also we talked about NetSuite and its let's say the everything that NetSuite offers, right? And then in that, what is the AI capabilities within NetSuite along with the MCP?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In episode 2, we talked about specific examples.
Yeah.
How to create a forecast, how to create a purchase order in NetSuite from MCP, how to see your inventory levels, right? So real practical examples of how the model context protocol in NetSuite works with Claude and ChatGPT.
Yeah, and then in episode 3 we talked about the pitfalls, right? And then in that pitfalls we have given you some of the best practices as well, like how to overcome those pitfalls, right?
Yeah.
So Before we close out, any final words, Alejandro?
Yeah. So what's the next step, right? Where does this leave us, right? And what do we want any CFO, controller, IT professional to take away from this, right? The end of the era of ERP as a passive tool is over, right? We always talked about ERP being the system of record.
Yeah.
What we want our listeners to take away from this is that organizations that are going to be succeeding over the next 5 to 10 years are converting their ERP system of record into a system of intelligence, right? Using MCP to extract intelligence and predictions. And and the technology exists today. AI is not tomorrow; it's yesterday. Actually,
Yes,
it already exists. So, what our encouraging words to you guys are: start somewhere. Start now. Build one use case. You'll realize how exciting it is. Once you build one, you build the second one. Listen to things we said about governance, planning. Don't just go guerrilla marketing in this.
Yes.
Really try to have a plan, but stay curious.
Stay curious.
The day of artificial intelligence for ERPs are now. So thanks for your time. We'll see you next time.